Welcome, everybody, to Beyond the Touch Tank, impactful animal exhibits through narrative technology. My name is Jared Wells. I am a senior show writer and creative lead here at Ideas, an Orlando-based experience design company, and I am thrilled beyond belief to be talking with all of you here today about a topic that's very near and dear to our hearts as both designers and fans of animal experiences all over the world. You know, zoos and aquariums, they are some of the oldest forms of entertainment that, well, we've had as human beings. They date all the way back to ancient Egypt, and generations have taken joy and inspiration from encountering exotic animals from around the world, and in them always seeking to find something that's familiar to our own human experience. And I think for a lot of us, pressing our noses against the glass of an exhibit at a local zoo or aquarium is probably one of our first and most formative memories. It certainly is for me. But we live in an age now where, attention spans are declining and expectations for interactivity and immersion are drastically increasing. And nowadays, guests really crave to do more than just see an animal behind glass. They want to connect with it in a visceral and memorable way. And as more traditional forms of hands-on animal experiences like petting in zoos and touch tanks fall into the crosshairs of animal activists and fans themselves, it's time for us to look to interactive technologies to see how we can substitute and even deepen connections between guests and animals. And I'm really, really excited to be joined today by a menagerie of marvelous talent from the zoo and aquarium design business. I would like to introduce our panelists. First, we have Jay Tacey, who is president and CEO of Zoo Solutions and a SeaWorld veteran at that. We have Pete Colangelo, Vice President of Experience Design and Planning at the Florida Aquarium. And we have my boss, Mike Yeager, Executive Vice President and Director of Design for Ideas. Gentlemen, I'm so glad to have you here today. Oh yeah, and that's me. Boy, what a handsome guy. I am really ecstatic to have you three gentlemen here today to talk about a world that we have all delved into to various degrees and to explore how technology and interactivity can help bring zoos and aquariums into the next generation of entertainment. And Jay, you probably have more experience than all of us at designing and maintaining and innovating animal exhibits. So I'd like to start off this conversation with a pretty fundamental question, and that's how should animal exhibits impact guests? What makes them successful?
Yeah, great question, Jared. And first of all, thanks for having me. I'm honored to be a part of this group, believe me. To recount the history of it that you touched upon, it's always been a part of our society, always been a part of our fabric, but I don't think ever before in our history as a species has it ever been more important that our message gets across to the guests. With all of the pressures of society, not to mention all of the physical and natural pressures on the wild world that's out there. I think now more than ever, it's critical and responsible for us to create exhibits that convey a message in a meaningful and impactful way. The trick that we'll talk about today, I'm sure, is to do so without clobbering people over the head with tons of science and tons of fire and brimstone, right? These experiences and especially these animal exhibits need to be impactful. And I think that's going to involve engagement on multiple different levels through multiple different channels.
Agreed. And so in your experience, what kind of animal exhibits generally resonate most with guests? I mean, what are species that stand out to you, and what are ways of exhibit design that you have seen that facilitate those sort of more organic interactions between the animal and the guest?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, again, we're in the age of information, and anybody's got a, supercomputer in their pocket that they can pull up a video and see, videos of a jaguar hunting in the Amazon and things of that nature. So everybody is aware of more than ever of what these habitats should look like, right? And I think we're more in tune, for the better, to what the animal's needs are. So I think what resonates now more than ever with the guest experience is being able to look at an exhibit and just understand and feel the emotional, response of that looks like a place that a jaguar should live. That looks like a great place for that animal to be. So I think, you know, the impact that doesn't need to be explained, that somebody, I guess, could walk by and just look at it and feel good about it, is going to resonate more nowadays more than ever.
That's fair. No, I think that's a really good point. And you know, uh, it does raise a question in my mind. When guests go to you know, a zoo or an aquarium, which are increasingly more and more themed experiences, how important is that environmental immersion in, you know, the realities of what that animal might experience in the wild? How do guests value that in terms of just seeing, you know, an animal in, of course, a well, you know, a well-developed and well-kept facility? How much do they seek to have the additional bit of storytelling and immersion in that sense, at least in your experience?
No, yeah, it's a great point. You know, getting back to the digital age, you know, everybody's phone, we carry all of these apps that are programmed to try to hold our attention. And there are algorithms and everything else that allow them to do so. So to ignore that is futile. You know, we need to use that to the best of our advantage, in my opinion. And I think that involves having a all-encompassing educational experience for the guests that is also designed to hold their attention, right? So it's not just about the exhibit, not just about the animal. That can be what gets them there and what keeps them there enough to get our story across, our message across. And that story can be carried and should be carried, you know, if done correctly, on multiple different platforms, whether it's digital or just graphic signage. It's usually a combination of the above in the great exhibits, right? So you know, I used to enjoy, I still enjoy walking through zoos around the world, of course, but we used to measure kind of our engagement secondarily by the amount of stay time a guest would spend in front of an exhibit, you know, and for years through multiple different facilities, we measured this, and that was how we, you know, had at least some sort of a clue as to what people were feeling or experiencing. And you know, now as I walk through zoos these days and see people react to some of the exhibits that we've done, the secondary measure is, are they taking a video of it? You know, are they shooting something for Instagram? Are they, you know, is this something they want to share with the world? So, you know, all of those things are great indicators, I think, of whether or not your message is getting across.
That's very insightful. And that leads me to another question. Obviously, you know, you want guests to be engaged, you want guests to enjoy the experience, and yes, obviously documenting it for themselves to remember and to show to friends is a great harbinger of your success. But I wonder on a more let's say more informational level, what would you say is the desired outcome for a guest that experiences an animal? What do you think is the takeaway, the optimal takeaway? Is it purely informational? Is it more emotional? And I'm going to open that up to everyone else on the panel. Pete, I'm sure you also have some thoughts on that.
Well, yeah, I think you know, as a designer, yes, yeah, yes, of course, Jay, you're spot on. You know, we measured dwell times, and we want to always increase that and try to get people to stay a little longer and enjoy the experience. But that connection you talk about, I you know, I come from the, you know, decisions are made usually first from the heart, and you want that. You want to, again, that connection to the animal, that you want to feel something, and yeah, you might just be excited. That's the first time you've seen anything that strange and unusual that close, or maybe you have seen this particular animal on a video, right? Because it's so available right now today. But to actually see the individual hairs, the skin, the color of scales, and whatever it is, the, you know, the majesty of that animal, it's so compelling. The what we talked about earlier too, and I think you touched on it, Jay, was the entire experience, right? How are you setting it up? What are you bringing the guest into, right? What are they smelling? What are they feeling? Did the temperature just drop? Did it get warmer in here? You know, those sort of things. Is it visually compelling? I mean, we, again, like you said earlier, Jared, was, you know, the attention deficit are seems to be a little bit shrink. There seem to be shrinking a little bit more, but yeah, I think more importantly, also, I think what happens too in those moments, not only the bond between the guest and the animal, but the bond that happens with the families that are going to visit, right? And they together can experience something, and make memories and talk about it for years to come. Oh, remember when we got to experience that, or we saw this, that particular animal. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that facilitating the connection, that is always the goal. And at the end of the day, that's what we're always going to go back to. And I think sort of leading us into our next topic, interactivity has always been something that zoos I think have tried to pursue, particularly in recent years. As we mentioned earlier, things like petting zoos and touch tanks like that are very literal interpretations of interaction, reaching out and touching an animal. Those things have certainly developed some ethical concerns over the years in the way they're executed. There's also sort of an emergence of interest in private, up close, interactive experiences with animals.
Right.
I guess my question for all of you, it's a two-part question, is one, what do you think qualifies as an interactive experience in a zoo or aquarium? Or I should say, what do you think qualifies as a successful one? And then beyond that, how do you think that they can be best used as a meaningful storytelling tool? And I'll toss that to you first, Pete.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you, Jared. I wanted to add to that emotional connection piece, but um, when you feel something about something, you're more inspired to take action, right? And whatever that is, and that could be something like, oh, I got to be more aware about how I throw this trash away, or drinking out of a plastic bottle, or whatever it is. You may be, because how it affects that environment, and if our one of our chairman of our board at the Florida Aquarium is also the CEO at a local hospital, and he's always saying, healthy environment, healthy people, right? So we do the same. So we try to make that connection also. So I just wanted to follow up on that. So you were asking me what's the importance of having interactivity in the
Yeah, and how can they best be used to tell the story of
yeah
the animal?
yeah I'm going to we really got into the interactive world when the ideas team created Morphed, which opened last year, and it's highly interactive. Morph is a story about adaptation with animals and how they change. And so we use technology, and not only just technology, but even kinetic interactives, if you will, to reinforce those type of behaviors. And so I think, again, as a learning tool, and again, it's a bonding tool, right? Because again, families are coming together, whether it's a family of four or people are on a date, at least they're engaging and doing this thing together, typically. But so yeah, that again, it just reinforces the connection, and then also as a learning tool, kind of help. Oh, I get it. This squirt gun game is not just a squirt gun game; it's actually mimicking the something that an archer fish does. When they shoot, use water to spit water out to get their prey, that type of thing. So, and it's always a fun way again, just to educate our guests that come in.
Absolutely. I know something that we've learned a lot here at Ideas over the years is how the use of your hands and the tactility of an experience is so key to firing the neurons in your brain to get it thinking, to get it learning, and to get it absorbing. So finding those ways to make these experiences hands-on, I think are key for not only imparting informational goals and encouraging playfulness, but also just getting people in the right headspace to absorb new knowledge coming from all directions. Now, Mike, you are a designer par excellence. So this question, I really am curious to get your take on. Obviously, when working on Morph, there were a lot of different types of interactives that included sound and light, and really fun tactile effects. How can you integrate something interactive, physical interactive, into an animal exhibit without distracting from what's actually behind the glass?
So I just want to touch on something. I want to build upon Jay and Pete in terms of, because there's kind of a three-legged stool here. So Jay has talked about the importance of fidelity to the exhibit itself, and Pete has talked about the connection between uh, families and the subject matter of the animals. And then there is this extra piece, which is, all right, so I can go and see this and I'm going to have this great experience, but what do I get to take away from it? And that's where I think some of these technological solutions can come in terms of providing a solid connection to information in a different way. We are in an age of immersion, and people tend to learn best by doing. So the passive placards of the past that just impart a certain amount of information don't engage people the way they used to. So I think the idea is to add something that engages them. We sort of call it broccoli ice cream at Ideas. The idea that I'm going to give you something important, but I'm going to wrap it in something fun, so that you are absorbing it without thinking about it. And when we engage all the senses, people tend to remember experiences better than just using just sight. And smell, hearing, and tactile pieces are all very important to that. We get asked a lot. A lot of times people come to us and they'll be fixated on a piece of technology, like, oh, virtual reality, or I saw something, over here. And we always tell them, please don't do that. We as designers try to be technology agnostic. What we want to do is, if you're designing an animal exhibit, first of all, we want to know what animals you want to pick, because you're probably, if you're an organization, you're putting together an exhibit that you've sort of already decided does something for your guest base. Like when Morphed, it was about adaptation. Someplace else, it might be about a region of the globe, or a collection of animals that have similar characteristics. So you kind of, as the owner, kind of comes to us with a predetermined program, and we're good with that. And what I'd really like everybody to do is not fixate on the technology, but go, all right, now what are the stories we want to tell? How do we reach into that animal's environment and into their physical characteristics, and pull something forward and share it with the guests in a way they just couldn't otherwise do it. And it's important to consider that fairly early in the design process, because you know there are different kinds of interactives. We talked today. There are digital interactives that could be touchscreen based. There are kinetic and mechanical interactives that involve people touching and manipulating. And any of those are probably going to have some electrical support. So we're talking about electrical, mechanical, and digital infrastructure that you need to build into something. Because what we found, let's say, you could put a touchscreen in a place and it could live with software on it. We have found that it is helpful to the organization to be able to get that onto the internet so that you can change the content remotely. So that brings in a whole different set of requirements that you have to build into the space. But it's nice for the owner to be able to do that. If you're using computers on site, you may need HVAC, may be a requirement, like computers heat. So we've got to make sure they're cooled properly. And if you've got anything that's mechanical, you're going to have to anchor it, either the floor and the walls or the ceiling or all three. So knowing, sort of getting together at the beginning is really important. And we get asked a lot, well, who should be involved in this? And it's like, pretty much everybody. You want to get your educational department, the animal people for sure, maintenance. You need to drag them in, because they're going to probably inherit taking care of all of this stuff. And then on the design side, you want your writers and your design developers and digital people all to be part of this. So it's a pretty robust team it takes to deploy and integrate these properly. And I would say the one thing we never want to do is upstage the animal. We want to be an accessory. We want to be something that makes the experience deeper and richer, but we want people to focus on it. If they come and do something that we've developed, we want them to turn right back to the tank and go, wow, I didn't see that coming. I didn't understand that, you know. So that's, I mean, as designers of those things that support the animals, I think that those are the thoughts that we have about it.
Yeah, I think that's there's so many great things to touch on there. Jay, I want to ask this one to you, since you've spent a lot of time in both the zoo and aquarium world. You know, I know when I was a kid, I'm a Hoosier, so when I was a kid, I grew up going to the Indianapolis Zoo, and when I remember very specifically, there was an attraction there that was one of the most popular things, and it was like this. It was kind of you know, a B minus simulator that took you on an African safari. It wasn't associated with any of the animal habitats that were there. It was just like, here's a safari themed ride. That kind of exists in the zoo. So I want, and this I want to start with you, but I want everyone else to chime in on this. Mike, you alluded to it already. Should interactives and should experiences within a zoo or aquarium always be educational, or can they be purely entertainment? Or is there a golden ratio to strike in that? I'm just curious to have your thoughts on it.
That's a great question. And I think the ultimate answer is, yeah, they should be educational, and you might not always know that they are, right? Because again, getting back to some of our earlier topics, you know, with all of the constant seemingly storms of negativity that we have to wade through on a daily basis, you know, we get numbed to all of that stuff. And by all means, our facilities and the things that serve our mission should absolutely be fun. Like, that has to be key in everything we do. Otherwise, you're missing the point, because you're not going to get the repeat visitors. You're not going to get the people that go off to their family groups afterwards and tell everybody else about what they've experienced, you know. So I think it's integral to everything that we do, that it's got to be fun. Whether or not the guest knows they're being educated, we can slip that stuff in, but fun needs to be a primary focus for sure.
Absolutely. What's your experience with that, Pete?
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree. I don't think it's one or the other. You know what I mean? I think you're developing the exhibit, or I'm sorry, the interactive, for the sole purpose of educating our guest about that particular animal or species. And so um, that's, I mean, and the interactive can be designed to be as boring as, you know, and still teach that. I think so that's why it has to be fun. You have to design something that not only educates, but it's also something that you want people to engage with. You don't want it just sitting there because you spent some money, you allocated some money in your budget for that particular element. You don't want a dud, right? So that's where the creative process comes in with the team, right? I want to add something to Mike too. Um, it's a delicate balance working in a gallery full of live animals. If they're actually, well, in the aquarium, you have a lot of glass. And so you got to be cognizant of where you're placing these interactives, because if it's too loud and obnoxious, you don't necessarily want it, you know, for the well-being of the animal. If it's too bright and flashy, well, you can't have a lot of flashy lights because you can be cognizant of the animal's reactions to that, and so, or the brightness of it. So and also there's the reflectability. So that's always a big one. You want, like Mike said earlier, you want the animal to be the sole focus. And so if you're going up to the glass that you want to put your nose to, and you see yourself, it's you know, because of the lighting, that's and where the interactive is a distraction that's reflecting into the glass, you know, it defeats the purpose a little bit. So there's a lot of things that go. I'm just following up on Mike said. A lot of things that go into the design. I won't even get into the maintenance, because I think that's coming up. But
For sure. Oh, well, and sort of starting to segue into, you know, how you actually accomplish creating interactives in these spaces. Mike, you already touched on the importance of having you know, all of the heads in the room as these interactives are developed and ideated. But I wonder on a more practical level, what does that collaboration look like? Where does it start? Does it and what should the relationship be? What should that dynamic be between the designers and the education people and the animal care people? And I'll just toss that out to anyone because you've all had experience working with those teams. So please.
I'll just start by saying it's a bit of a juggling act, but one that's absolutely necessary. I think it always starts with animal welfare. I mean, I don't think anybody on this panel would disagree that the first thing we want to do is make sure that nothing we do is negatively impactful to the animal. So, and we might, as designers, not always know that. So then your animal team comes into place and they'll give you guidance on that. Then we might come up with, here's the kinds of things I think would be interesting to engage guests with. And that's where you're going to get the educational department involved. They're going to have an opinion about that and about how you reach out and what kind of messaging. They may even say, I've got additional messaging I'd like you to build into this because it's important to the mission of promoting this animal. Then people like Pete in the exhibits department, they have continuity that they want to build across their brand, and we need to work with them to ensure that. Then, like you said, there's the maintenance people that, hey, can I get into this? Can I service it? What kind of spare parts does it take? What fails first? So, I would almost say in a way, although I think all of us really believe that interactives are the necessary engagement that the industry needs, it's not for the faint of heart to you don't just jump into it or you learn a lot of tough lessons right off the bat because it takes a lot from the beginning to the end, and the end being, I've got this thing operating my gallery. How do I make sure the guest satisfaction stays high and this thing keeps operating? Because I'm going to tell you, I don't care whether it's a touchpad or a kinetic mechanical thing, you are inviting people to work on destroying it every day of its life. I mean, that much interaction on any mechanical device is a promotion of failure. So there's a certain amount that goes into design and a certain amount that goes into maintenance. That's important.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mike. And I think, at a higher level, there's also a level of commitment that, I love to see when you start one of these projects, from the organization itself, that from the beginning wants to get, people like ideas and stuff like that in the room to discuss it. Because if it's not happening, then it's probably going to be an afterthought, right? Or a retrofit of some sort. So the other thing that I might add on to that is to keep those people engaged, those educators, those maintenance people. Don't have it be a one and done. They sat in on a meeting for 2 hours and talked about it 3 months ago, and now we're further down the line. Bring them back in. I know it costs resources. I know it takes time, but it's critical to the execution of the overall project to have them come back in and touch base briefly and say, yeah, I still think that's going to work, or oh, wait, watch out for this, or whatever the case might be, right?
Some of these projects can be, they're not 3 years in development. They could be a year in development, and that's full from blank slate to completely realized. And so, but it is vital, you're right, to have everybody sitting at that table. And not only that, if you're working with whatever team you're working with to develop that particular interactive, they got to be involved. And so I think moving, again, we're going into another area here, but there can be a number of interactives that could consume their entire time. And again, that could be taking away from their daily operative stuff. It's something to think about, right? So, I mean, someone said that before you even go into it, at least have a really good understanding of what the expectation is and the amount of time it's going to take, and not my amount of focus it's going to take to see some of these things through. Yeah, and it's not for the faint of heart. It really isn't. You really got to go, because at the end of the day, I've seen it. The guests really are just digging this interactivity that's found in that typically not found in a zoo and aquarium. You know, I think this is something that's fairly new, or it's going to be coming up. I mean, they exist, but it's, again, I think there's going to be more of it.
Absolutely. Well, and Pete, when we worked with your team on Morphed, I know that was a big step for the Florida Aquarium. And now that, you know, it's been a little bit over a year, I'm curious, what do you think are ways that zoos and aquariums can prepare to have these new types of technologies and interactives on the floor? How can they, perhaps a word we use a lot is pre-spawn to a lot of the challenges that these new interactives pose?
Yeah, a great question. Again, just having them involved and understanding. The thing is, depending on depending on the amount of time that you have to develop something is going to be key, right? And I think if that's a decision that your organization is going to agree on and decide on, this is the direction we're going in, then make every effort to support that, right? Up front, whatever it takes. So because you do need that involvement, you need your tech team, whoever that is, to really understand how these things are going to be built and developed, and some of the challenges that they may face later on. You know, and that's another thing too. Some of the decisions we've made because of our time frame was always to try to find something off the shelf, tried and true, right? And then modify it to our story. Sometimes those slight modifications, that's something that's tried and true, can become problematic. I've experienced it, you know? And so you're never gonna be able to hit the home run. I wish I could tell everybody here that you design something and it's going to work, other than, I don't know, throwing a rock on the ground or something like that. There's something it's not gonna do. I think you're, I think there's gonna be some level of time and effort to keep these things up and running, right? We
Absolutely.
all know how many people, I'm sure, if I saw everybody and asked a question, how many times you went into a science center, and I'm sorry if anybody's on a, I've been there, I've been in that world, and see, you know, a majority of the interactives down because of, right? We all say, oh yeah, we can do that, we can raise our hand. So it's a dedicated effort, an internal team dedicated effort to keep things going up and running.
Part of the problem is if you're trying to be unique, you are really, and that one of the challenges of doing interactives is it's very easy to enter into the realm of prototyping, where you're the first person to do a particular thing. And I can say that Pete and I talked about even Morphed. This project we've talked about was on a very fast track schedule, and one of the things I think we would have both liked to have seen is a prototype of a prototype play tested for a little bit more time than we had in the schedule to do. And so I would say that what we did is we deployed prototypes in the field and then learned a few things in the first couple of months of operation and had to respond. And that's very typical, but
Yeah,
in a more perfect world, it would be great to build a sort of a test model of something and let a bunch of people play with it and find the weak spots.
right, right.
Absolutely.
I gotta tell everybody, the exhibit is a complete and total success. People are loving it. People are more engaged with the animals. I believe we get more dwell time in Morph than we have in any other the gallery experiences, with the exception of the our large window, viewing window. But yeah, we are testing it, we're evaluating it, and we are finding just great results for our guests. So I think they're going to want more, or expect more from the Florida Aquarium moving forward.
Absolutely. Jay, you are certainly one of the most innovative individuals in the space of exhibit design and integrating interactivity into animal spaces that I am aware of. So I'm curious, in rooms that you've been in, what is the push that it takes to get aquariums and zoos to consider even entertaining these types of offerings from the beginning? How are those ideas sold, and how can the operational challenges that a lot of people immediately jump to be presented in a way that these sometimes reluctant parties are willing to engage in?
Yeah, great question, Jared. You know, that is the million-dollar question, because all too often those are the first bits of the experience that are beat out, and all too often, if they were budgeted to be put in initially, when they do fail, you know, they go away. So, you know, I think that's the hard part, and that is, I think, starts with a consistency of messaging, and reiterating and harping on what the goal of the experience, not just the exhibit, but the whole experience, you know, with all parties, all the big players, that needs to be reiterated. Remember what we're trying to do here. Remember how we agreed we were going to accomplish this. And, you know, just kind of relaying and reinforcing the importance of those things so that they stay in the budget, and stay top of mind, because honestly, that's what it takes. And again, far too often, that's not the case.
Certainly, certainly. This is sort of backpedaling a bit, but there was something that you brought up, Pete. Interactives. They are persnickety things, mercurial in nature, and they will inevitably go down. So, for all of you, I'd like to pose the question: when those inevitable downtime happen, how do you offset them? What do you have there that still keeps guests engaged with the animal when maybe the thing that's right next to it isn't working? What are ways that you can mitigate guest dissatisfaction?
Well, if you have the ability to take that particular interactive off the floor, I would do that. It's much better than hanging a sign on it. People won't know that something was supposed to sit there typically, if the gallery's finished out. But yeah, we don't have a plan or have plans oh, we pulled something out, so we need to fill that void, because there's so much else going on in the aquarium. And again, the galleries, this particular gallery, speaking of the Morph Gallery, it's loaded with a good amount of interactives to keep people engaged. So, and again, it's going back. I think the habitats are just as or more engaging, should be more engaging, or just as engaging. So again, we really want people to just remember. Me in particular would love people to remember the entire experience, but at the end of the day, we want to leave knowing what animal and what they just learned about. So that should be first and foremost.
Absolutely. Well said. This next question I want to get to is a bit of a fun one. We've all been out in the world, and we've all seen some stellar examples of how zoos and aquariums are integrating these new technologies and these new ways of guest engagement. So I want to ask each of you, what's the most effectively executed and integrated interactive that you've seen in a zoo or aquarium? And Jay, I'll toss that one to you first.
Yeah, this one was so hard for me when I was thinking about this, because I'm such a fan of so many different levels of it. I mean, I still respect at certain facilities where it makes sense that the painted python on the floor, just it's easy and kids can visualize it and see how big they can get, without having to pull the snake out and stretch it on the floor. So, I think I measure a lot of that with the impact. Are you reaching guests the way that you intended to do? But I have to say, just having recently worked over on the SeaWorld Abu Dhabi project, I've not seen it done to that level before. And that was a commitment of, getting all of this stuff in and getting the technology in from the beginning that rang through the entire project. And to see it and walk through it was a special opportunity. All of that said, you don't have to spend $2 billion to hit these points and hit these objectives, right? One of the coolest things I've ever seen exhibit wise, and you can maybe argue whether or not it's interactive. I would argue that it is, but the Tennessee Aquarium had an exhibit with electric eels where they had, attached speakers that could react to electrical pulses. So you're engaging the senses in a different way. You're hearing the electricity of the eels for one, which again, to your point, you know, you're lighting up different parts of your brain, right, when that's happening. And the other thing that they did was, you know, seasonally, they allowed the eels to light up a Christmas tree, like not continuously, but as you could hear the pulse of the electricity, you could see the tree light up and flicker a bit, and people stood around that, and you could hear the kids chirping with laughter, and you know the parents like, oh my gosh, I just didn't realize, you know, that they did this, and you know, that to me was an absolute home run, and probably didn't cost them a lot of money, you know.
That's so cool. Mike, what about you?
Well, I'm a little, because we just finished working on Morphed with Pete. There was one exhibit that I really thought brought an animal attribute forward for guests to share, which was we had anableps on display, and anableps are also called four-eyed fish because their eyes are divided and they are able to see above and below the water at the same time. So how do you do that? Because we can't do that. And we developed a periscope that allows the guest to look through the viewfinder and have that similar experience of seeing above and below the water at the same time. Uh, a fairly simple mechanic, and the digital aspect of it was really an iPad, and we used the motion sensing capabilities of an iPad. But it just, you can look into a tank and you can read a placard that says they can do it, but being able to step to the side and do it yourself, I thought it was a simple gag, but it had a lot of effect for supporting an attribute of that animal.
Cool. Yeah, I agree. It was definitely a home run. Pete, how about yourself?
Well, first of all, Jay, thank you for that idea. I'm going to talk to our animal care people tomorrow, first thing, about seeing if we can light up our Christmas tree with the electric. Yeah, I love it. For me, I've not been to this exhibit. I've seen it in video and seen it presented at an IAPA session, but it was an orangutan exhibit at the Indianapolis Zoo, where they actually have the animal playing tic-tac-toe with the guests, right? And guess who wins 99% of the time? I think that is just brilliant fun. It's, I mean, what connection? I mean, how deep is that connection of kid and animal, you know, within, you know, with glass just separating the two, and having fun playing a game together. That for me, that tops it all.
That's really beautiful. And that is such a great reminder, you know, as we've talked today, technology obviously surfaces frequently, but interactivity is a lot more than just buttons and games and you know, the technology itself. It's all about the connection, and there are a lot of ways to do that. So this will be a real quick one, but I want to go around again and just ask each of you, just in a few sentences, in a paragraph, or however much you can summon, what does an effective interactive achieve in a zoo or aquarium? What is the result? And I'll go in. I'll start with you on this one, Mike.
Well, I think, you know, it's a lot of the things we talked about today. There's understanding, connectivity, empathy with the animal, and I think at the end of the day, you just want to delight guests. If you could hit those four marks, I think that you've developed an effective interactive.
Well said. Jay?
Yeah, I agree with Mike. The animals come first, right? But after that, are you engaging the guest? Is your message getting across? Is it fitting with your mission? You know, are the guests, are they having fun? Are they enjoying themselves when they're interacting with that space and those items?
Sure. And Pete?
Yeah, I agree completely. To me, again, when you start seeing a lot of selfies being taken, a lot of video being taken, and a lot of excitement displayed, I got to say that one of the most simplest interactives that we have in Morphed is just a little cutout animal, and you place it into a slot within the environment it's supposed to live, and there's a timer to it. And I think when we first opened the exhibit, like the first couple of weeks, I was just kind of observing people. And this is a kid's game. It's at kid level. Like, you get on your knees to do it. And I saw a mom there, like a middle-aged, and her teenage daughter. Well, her teenage daughter wasn't close by, but the mom was trying to beat the 25-second timer to get all these animals into these slots, and she wasn't able to do it. So she's yelling over to her daughter and husband to come over and help her and do this together, right? And I thought, beautiful. That's what it is. That's it. Again, that's what I said at the beginning. I love to see the bonding of not just the guest to the animal, but to the guests to themselves, you know, with their family or friends, whatever like that. So I think that for me, that was the true measure of success.
That's beautifully said. And yes, at the end of the day, smiles and laughter are a metric that cannot be matched in any way. So that's excellent. Well, gentlemen, we are coming to the end of our time. We've got a couple of questions that have come in through the chat, and I would invite everyone else at this time to raise your hand or to send your questions to the chat. And we will certainly try to address those. But the first one I've got, we talked a lot about maintenance and operations being engaged and how that's important early on. When should marketing and communications teams be a part of the design conversation?
We always invite someone from the marketing team or a number of people from the marketing team to the workshops or initial design sessions. You know, they have to be engaged from beginning to end. They have to know. They don't have to know all the detail, but at least they have to know how the story is going to shape. What is the tenor of the exhibit? What is the color palette? What are the fonts? All those things that help inform them when they're doing their marketing packages.
Absolutely. That's very well answered. Jay, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I totally agree. And, you know, often they can lend something to the conversation early that can also kind of shift things a little bit as well. So the sooner the better.
Yes, agreed. You know, another question that came across was, should interactives ever take a starring role? That was another one that I saw. Should animals ever support the interactive, I guess is how I would interpret that question. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Yeah, I think they absolutely can. Again, you know, it's about engaging the guest and making these connections. And let's be honest, as much as I truly love animals and most species, some of them are really hard to exhibit in a compelling way, right? Or maybe there are larger topics that we're trying to get across, like you know, bird migration or pollination or conservation as a whole, the conservation of the Amazon rainforest. Some of these very, very large topics kind of lend themselves well to having a lot of interpretives to help tell that story and take a starring role with regard to some of those.
Sure. Cool. Mike, do you have any thoughts on that one? I'm curious.
Well, as a designer, I think from our standpoint, and I agree with everything Jason just said, but knowing, you know, I think sometimes, and Pete might be able to speak to this, when you're bringing in somebody like us to do something that may be different in an animal environment, you're working with an animal team whose chief concern is the well-being of the animal, and their focus is always presenting that animal to the guest. So I would always I would back off of that. You know, we're always happy we can design something that'll tell all kinds of stories, but you know, I wouldn't go into a meeting trying to supplant the animal as the star of the show. Just I think that it would put us all on bad footing to start with. If it turns out that there's alternate messaging and bigger topics, we're always willing and able to jump in and do them. But I think we try to be respectful of the fact that the animal teams already have a tough job. So we try to position ourselves that, hey, I'm here to help you. I'm going to help you tell the stories of these animals in a way that no matter how you put them out in front of the guests, you can't do it. So but hearing that from you, Jay, I'm actually very pleased.
Well, I was speaking from the animal side on that one, so I appreciate the context.
That's fantastic. Well, so I will open it up to anyone else on the Zoom. If anyone has a question, right now is your chance to chime in and avail yourself of this incommensurate level of wisdom and expertise that we have.
I'd love to know if any of you have had a project or an immersive experience that was not implemented that you felt was extremely creative or was creative or should have been included. I mean, I know a lot of times you're under the mercy of the powers that be and then, the decision makers on the other side. But I'm curious if you've seen anything, especially now that I agree with all of you that we're headed towards a more immersive feel on exhibits, especially in zoos and aquariums.
That's a great question.
I was just going to say, I think this is a common plague of the design process within zoos and aquariums, honestly, where all too often, again, those elements seem to be the first thing that gets VE'd out. So, I can honestly tell you, when we're thinking of the animals to display and the message we want to get across, we should also be thinking about at that point in time, what are the unique characteristics of that animal or the natural history elements of that animal that we want to display? Because if you don't design an exhibit or a habitat that allows the animal the opportunity to display those things, they're not going to do it right. And then you're not going to have that moment with the guests. But all of that, is supported by these elements. So, can you have an interactive that, in the absence of that particular behavior you're trying to exhibit, can help kind of get the point across or exhibit that in some way, shape, or form. So, I can tell you without specifics, at least 50 times on different projects, we've had great ideas for some of these interactives that quite frequently come out in the beginning stages of conversation, and they just never hit fruition.
I will say that one of the challenges we have is, I come from an entertainment background primarily, and a lot of times we will suggest things that tend to anthropomorphize the animals, and we can think of a lot of really fun ways to do that. And in our minds, hey, what better way to connect the guest to the psyche of this animal? But we get waved off a lot on that. Most of the time, the animal teams are like, "Oh, that is the one thing we do not want to do. We do not want to anthropomorphize the animals and make the guests walk away thinking they have attributes that they don't. We may not fully understand their emotions or their motivations, but let's not speculate about that."
Well said.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would just follow up. I think Jay's right. I think, unfortunately, someone who's actually overseeing a lot of the guest pathway and the guest experience side of it, by the time you got through the costing things out from the habitat, I think we have enough to buy a 6-pack and a pizza. But so unfortunately those things do get valued out. But however, again, if you set up in the very early stages of your workshop some guiding principles, and you can make the case, that, hey, this thing is really going to help explain or engage our guests to the animal in a profound way, and they're walking away inspired to take action, whatever it is, then that's something that if you're all collectively decided upon, and they found it's important. Sometimes you do find the monies to do it, right? Somehow, but yeah, those things typically, unfortunately, can get valued out.
For sure. Well, gentlemen, we have just about come up on time, I think. But before we say farewell, I'd like to say first, it's been a blast talking with you guys. Your wealth of insight is humbling and mind-boggling at the same time, and I'm sure everyone on this webinar feels the same way. But before we go, I'd like for all of you to at least say where folks can get in touch with you and take advantage of that expertise you all have. Jay, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Thanks again for having me. This has been a blast. You can find us at info@zoosolutions.com.
Cool. Pete?
Yeah, I'm at the Florida Aquarium, and my email is Pete Colangelo flaquarium.org.
Excellent. And you can find both Mike Yeager and myself at Ideas Orlando. Be sure to follow us on all of the Felicitous platforms. Again, gentlemen, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and a privilege. And to everyone else on the call, thank you for giving us your time. We hope to connect with you some other at another juncture. And for now, have a wild day. Thanks.